The Galactic Council ignored Earth's warning, then the stars went dark. The pulse hit every sensor array on Earth at exactly the same moment. Not a signal, not a wave. A push, like something vast had pressed its hand flat against the fabric of space and shoved. Every gravitational detector on the planet spiked and went red. Every deep space telescope automatically swiveled toward the same point in the sky. The Keth Expanse, a region of the galaxy that every civilization in the known universe had quietly agreed for hundreds of years was simply nothing. Empty, boring, not worth the fuel. Ambassador Yale Doran was standing at the podium in the Grand Convocation Hall on Verath Prime when her earpiece buzzed. She did not flinch. She did not look down. She had been waiting 3 months for this moment, and she was not going to waste it by looking nervous. The hall was enormous. It was built for species that stood 4 meters tall, had multiple sets of limbs, and communicated partly through color shifts in their skin. Yale was 5 feet 6, had 2 arms, and communicated entirely through sound. She had learned, in 11 years of representing Earth to the Galactic Council, that this physical smallness was something the other species found oddly amusing. She had also learned that she did not care. 41 council species were seated in tiered rings around her. Some breathed different atmospheres and sat behind sealed panels. Some had sent holographic representatives from the other side of the galaxy. The room smelled, through the translation of her suit's environmental filters, like ozone and warm metal. Councillor Vrethsa of the Verath sat at the center of the high bench. Vrethsa was old in the way that mountains were old, slowly, heavily, and with an air of having seen every possible thing and found most of it disappointing. The councillor's translator pendant glowed amber as Yale began to speak. She did not ease into it. There was no time for easing. 47 days ago, Yale said, Earth's deep-range gravitational network recorded a pulse event originating from the Keth Expanse. The pulse repeated 11 times over the following 31 days. The intervals between pulses are decreasing. The amplitude of each pulse is increasing. The mathematical pattern of those intervals matches no known natural phenomenon. It matches, with a 94.6% correlation, a sequence that Earth's astrophysics teams are calling a consumption signal. She pressed a control on the podium. The holographic display above the center of the chamber lit up with Earth's data, graphs, waveforms, star charts, timing sequences. It was clean, precise, and thorough. Earth had spent 3 months making sure it was impossible to dismiss. The chamber was very quiet. Then, from the upper tier came a sound. Yale's translator identified it as the Verath equivalent of polite laughter. It spread. Not all species laughed, some had no mechanism for it, but enough of them made enough dismissive sounds that the meaning was clear. Vrethsa raised one long gray hand for quiet, and the sound stopped. Ambassador Doran, Vrethsa said, Earth has been a member of this council for 11 years. In that time, you have made 3 formal requests for military consultation, 2 requests for deep space survey cooperation, and 1 request, which I recall clearly, for assistance in what you described as an anomalous energy reading near the border of the 7th arm. That event proved to be a natural pulsar misidentified by your equipment. Yale did not move. With respect, Counselor, she said, Earth's equipment has significantly improved since that time. As has your confidence, Vrethsa said, and several counselors made sounds that translated as amusement. The Keth Expanse has been surveyed 14 times by council vessels over the past 6 centuries. It is empty. The academic consensus, held by civilizations far older and better equipped than Earth, is that it has always been empty and will remain so. What you are presenting is a gravitational anomaly that your own models admit could have 17 other explanations. The 17 other explanations account for a combined probability of 5.4%, Yale said. I am asking the Council to address the 94.6. Vrethsa was quiet for a moment. We thank Earth for its diligence, the counselor said finally. The report will be logged. A review committee will be assigned. We will notify your delegation of any findings within the Standard Council review period. The Standard Council review period was 2 years. Yale had expected this. She had been in this chamber enough times to know exactly how it worked. She had also come prepared for it. She straightened slightly at the podium. "Counselor," she said, "I am formally requesting that Earth be permitted to conduct an independent deep-range survey of the Keth Expanse, with Council observational support." "Denied," Vrethsa said. "The Expanse is a protected observation zone under the Third Charter of the Varath Accord. No survey vessels may enter without a full Council vote, which requires a minimum 6-month deliberation period. Then I am requesting an emergency session to accelerate that vote." "Denied. The threshold for an emergency session requires evidence of active threat. A gravitational anomaly does not meet that threshold." Yale stood at the podium. The holographic data still glowed above the hall. 41 species were watching her. She could feel the collective patience of the room, which was the patience of civilizations that had existed for thousands of years and had seen countless young member species arrive full of urgency and slowly learn that the galaxy moved slowly, and that was simply the way things were. She said one more thing. "Then I am recording for the official transcript at this time that Earth warned this council, that Earth presented its evidence, made its requests through proper channels and was denied. I am recording that the council was informed and that the council chose not to act." She stepped back from the podium. Vrethsa said something in the native Varath tongue that her translator rendered as unnecessary. The session moved on to other business. Yale walked back to her delegation seat and sat down beside her aide, a young man named Oliver Grant, who had been with her for 2 years and had learned to read her silences. "That bad," Oliver said quietly. "We're on our own," Yale said. Oliver nodded slowly. He had served long enough to understand what that meant. Yale pulled out her personal communicator and typed a single message to Earth Command. She used the private channel, the encrypted one, the one she only used when she was certain the content could not be intercepted and could not be officially attributed. The message said, "They said number proceed." The reply came in 11 seconds, which was fast even accounting for quantum relay. It was from Director Nora Whitfield at Earth Command, and it said, "We already have." Yale looked up at the holographic display, which still glowed over the chamber with Earth's data, still turning slowly, still ignored. She thought about the Keth Expanse. She thought about those pulses, each one stronger than the last, each one closer to Council space by a measurable fraction. She thought about what Earth had found buried in the Council's own historical archives. 4 brief, fragmented references to something in the deep expanse, in records that were each over 2,000 years old, each from a different species, each redacted. She had spent 3 months trying to get those records unsealed. The Council had declined. She looked at Oliver. "Make sure our translation of the archive fragments is stored in 3 separate off-site backups, none of them on Varath Prime." Oliver typed a note. "Done. Anything else?" "Yes," Yale said. "Make sure the shuttle is ready. I think we're going to be leaving in a hurry." Oliver looked at her carefully. "You think they'll come this way?" "I think," Yale said, "that whatever is in the Keth Expanse has been there a very long time, and it has never encountered anything that tried to stop it. And I think the Council just told the only species willing to try that it cannot." She looked at the display one more time. "Book the shuttle," she said. "We have work to do." The Keth Expanse looked wrong from the moment the S-Adamant crossed its boundary. Commander Sierra Cole had been in deep space for 9 years. She had flown through nebulae, inside the gravity wells of brown dwarfs, through debris fields from supernovae that had detonated 1,000 years ago and were still moving outward. She knew how space looked. She knew how it felt on instruments. The Keth Expanse felt like none of those things. It felt like a room that someone had just left. She stood at the forward console of the Adamant's bridge, looking at the primary sensor display, and the sensor display was wrong in a very specific way. Normally, deep space registered as a constant quiet noise, background radiation, microwave echoes, the soft hum of the universe's long memory. Here there was nothing, not silence, absence. The instruments were working perfectly. There was simply nothing for them to detect, as if something had cleaned the space thoroughly. "Second reading on background radiation," she said. Lieutenant Paul Decker, her senior science officer, ran the check without being asked twice. He was careful, like that, young, precise, the kind of person who checked his work and then checked it again. "Confirmed, Commander. Background radiation is suppressed across all detectable frequencies, not scattered, not absorbed in the usual sense, just not present." "That's not possible naturally," said Navigator Grace Elford from the far console. "No," Sierra agreed, "it is not." The Adamant was a long-range reconnaissance vessel, not a warship, not a science platform, something between the two. She carried 12 crew, 2 months of supplies, a full sensor suite, and enough engine to outrun most things that might want to follow her. Earth Command had sent her in with one instruction: observe, record, and return. Do not engage with anything. Do not attempt contact. Do not stop moving unless absolutely necessary. Sierra had no intention of stopping, but she also had no intention of leaving before she had something worth bringing back. "Bring up the star chart," she said. "Overlay current against the baseline survey from 3 months ago." Grace pulled the display. The bridge's central holographic table lit up with the map, the Keth expanse as it had been charted from long distance, cross-referenced with what the Adamant was currently reading at close range. The difference was visible immediately. "Those stars are missing," Paul said. He was not speaking dramatically. He was simply identifying what the display showed. A cluster of 14 stars on the near edge of the expanse, small, unremarkable, the kind of stars that show up in charts as data points rather than destinations, were simply absent, not reduced in brightness, not shifted, not obscured by dust or gas clouds. Absent. The space where they had been was the same particular nothing that surrounded the Adamant right now. Sierra stared at the display. She had been briefed on Ambassador Yale Doran's data, the pulses, the consumption signal theory. She had read the reports 3 times on the transit out. She had thought she understood what she might be looking at. She understood now that she had not understood at all. "How long?" she said. Paul checked the timestamp data. Based on the last survey pass, the most recent disappearance happened within the last 30 days. The earliest, he paused, the earliest goes back about 11 months. 11 months, Grace said quietly. "The pulse event started 9 months ago," Sierra said. "That means this started before we detected the pulses. We only got the signal once it was already well along." She turned from the table. "Adjust course. I want to move along the edge of the missing zone, not into it. Full passive sensors only. No active pings." "What are we looking for?" Paul said. "Evidence," Sierra said, "of anything." They flew parallel to the edge of the absent zone for 6 hours. The instruments picked up very little, which was itself the data. The absence was consistent. It did not vary. It did not pulse or shift. It simply was. Sierra had scientific advisors at Earth Command who had theorized that what they were looking at might be the result of a single event, some kind of stellar collapse phenomenon that had spread outward and consumed nearby stars in a chain reaction. She had believed that theory on the way out here. She stopped believing it at hour 7. "Commander," Paul's voice changed. He had a way of speaking that stayed calm even when the content of what he was saying was not calm at all. It was a skill Sierra appreciated enormously. "I have debris on the long-range passive, bearing 047, distance approximately 200,000 kilometers. Natural debris." A pause. "No." She crossed to his station. The sensor image was low resolution at this range, but the shapes were unmistakable. Not rocks, Not gas clouds, structures, or what had been structures. Pieces of something built, curved sections of hull or wall, each one enormous, one of them large enough to dwarf the adamant by a factor of 100. They were dark, cold, no energy signatures. They had been dead for a very long time. "Can you get a composition read?" Sierra asked. Running it now, Paul's fingers moved. "It's artificial, manufactured alloy and—" He stopped. "Paul, the alloy composition doesn't match anything in our materials database. It doesn't match anything in the Council database either. I cross-referenced both." He looked up. "Whoever built this, there is no record of them anywhere." Sierra straightened. The implications of that settled over the bridge like a drop in temperature. The Galactic Council's combined archives covered hundreds of known civilizations, living and extinct. If a civilization large enough to build structures this size was not in those archives, either the archives were deliberately incomplete, or this civilization had been gone so long that every trace of its record had been erased by time. Or something had erased it. "Photograph everything," Sierra said. "Full spectrum, every angle, maximum resolution. I want a complete physical record." "Already running," Paul said. "Grace," Sierra called across the bridge, "set a course that circles the debris field at a safe distance. I want to map its extent." Grace ran the calculations. "Commander, the debris field extends for approximately 2 million kilometers in the direction of the absent zone, and it's trailing, like something was moving through here and left pieces behind." "Moving from the absent zone toward Council space," Sierra said. Grace checked the bearing. "Yes, exactly." Sierra thought about that for a moment. She thought about the pulses. She thought about the 14 missing stars. She thought about the fragments Yale had found in the Council's hidden archives, brief, old, redacted. She thought about the fact that whatever had made those pulses had started before anyone detected them, which meant it had been doing this long before anyone was watching. And she thought about what Grace had just said, trailing, like something moving. "Increase speed by 20%, she said, "and get me a direct channel to Ambassador Doran, encrypted private line." "Establishing," Paul said. The channel took 40 seconds to connect through the relay network. When it opened, Yale's voice came through clearly but with the slight thinness of a very long distance. "Sierra," Yale said, "tell me something useful." "It's real," Sierra said. 14 stars are gone, not dimmed, not exploded. Gone. We have debris from an unknown civilization, no Council record, built on a scale that makes anything in the Council fleet look small. The debris is trailing in the direction of Council space. And the absent zone, the region where the stars were, is completely clean. No background radiation. Nothing. Like it was swept. There was a pause on Yale's end. "How long before it reaches the outer Council systems?" Yale asked. "Based on the rate of disappearances and the distance to the nearest Council star," Sierra said, "somewhere between 4 and 8 months." Another pause, longer this time. "The Council still isn't listening," Yale said. "I know," Sierra said. "That's why I'm sending everything directly to Earth Command as well. Every scan, every image, every reading. Don't wait for the Council. Whatever Earth is planning, it needs to start now." "It already has," Yale said, and then, "Be careful out there." "Always," Sierra said and meant it. She closed the channel. She stood at the center of the bridge for a moment, looking at the sensor display, at the darkness where 14 stars had been, at the long cold drift of debris from a people that no one remembered. Then the long-range proximity alarm went off. Not a collision warning, not a standard obstacle alert. The proximity alarm had 3 settings, and this was the third one, the one that meant something had detected the adamant. Something was responding to their presence. "Source," Sierra said immediately. Paul's hands were already moving. "It's not a ship. It's not a weapon. It's Commander. I don't have a classification for this. It's a field effect. It's expanding from the edge of the absent zone, and it is moving toward us." "Speed." Point 3 light. Jump preparation, Sierra said. Now everyone jump prep, Paul. Keep recording until the last possible second, then strap in. Grace was already calculating the jump, ready in 90 seconds. Sierra looked at the display. The expanding field was visible now as a kind of edge, not a visible light phenomenon but a sensor boundary, a place where the instrument stopped reading. It was moving steadily, calmly, with no acceleration or deceleration in the way that a tide moved. Not aggressive, not fast, simply inevitable. 60 seconds, Grace said. Paul, how much have we transmitted to Earth? 91% of total data. Keep the channel open until we jump. Transmit everything. The field was 50,000 kilometers away, then 40, then 30. 30 seconds, Grace said. Engineer Henry Caldwell's voice came through the internal comm from engineering, steady and focused. Jump drive at full charge, Commander. Ready on your word. Paul, Sierra said, step away from the console and strap in. Paul did not move, still transmitting, 97%. Paul. 5 more seconds. The field was 15,000 kilometers away. On the sensors, it looked like the edge of the universe. Beyond it, nothing. Just that particular deep absence that meant something had passed through here and taken everything with it. 100% transmitted, Paul said, and pushed back from the console. He took 3 fast steps toward his jump harness. Jump, Sierra said. The adamant tore itself out of real space. The field passed through the coordinates where the ship had been. There was nothing there to find. In engineering, Henry checked the drive status and then quietly said, "That was close." Sierra, strapped into the command seat, waited for the jump to complete. She kept her eyes on the display even though there was nothing to see during a jump. She was thinking about the field, about the way it had moved, not searching, not scanning. Simply expanding the way a process expanded, automatic, systematic, without interest or curiosity. It had not been trying to catch them. It had simply been continuing what it was already doing. That was the part that stayed with her. It had not changed what it was doing because of them. They were not significant enough to change its behavior. When the jump resolved and the stars came back around the adamant, Sierra let out a breath she had been holding without realizing it. "Head count," she said. Grace called out the crew, 11 names, all accounted for. There had been 12. "Where is Aldridge?" Sierra asked. A silence. Henry's voice came through from engineering, quieter now. "He was running the manual backup transmission array in the secondary bay when we jumped, Commander. The bay door, the pressure seal didn't fully cycle. The jump wave, he didn't make it to a harness in time." Sierra closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Then she opened them. "Log it," she said. "Full record, time and cause." She paused. "He got us to 100% transmission. Make sure that's in the log too." "Yes, Commander," Henry said. The bridge was quiet. The stars were outside the windows, still there, still turning. Sierra Cole looked at them and thought, "We need to move faster." Yale Doran got Sierra's full transmission 14 minutes after the adamant jumped clear. She was sitting in her private office on Vereth Prime, a small room 3 floors below the Grand Convocation Hall, surrounded by data screens and cold cups of tea that she kept forgetting to drink. She had been awake for 22 hours. She had been awake for 22 hours on most days for the past 4 weeks, because sleep felt like a luxury that the situation had not earned yet. She watched the transmission from beginning to end without pausing it. She watched the star charts. She watched the sensor feeds from the debris field. She watched the recording of the expansion field moving toward the adamant, and she watched the jump. And she sat with the silence of a commander who does not flinch, and a diplomat who has learned that the most dangerous moment is the moment right after you realize you were correct. She had been correct. She had known for 3 months that she was correct. Being correct in this case was not a comfort. She picked up her communicator and called Oliver Grant. "Get me an emergency session request in front of Vrethsa within the hour," she said. "I already submitted one 20 minutes ago," Oliver said. "I assumed." And declined. Insufficient threshold for emergency session. Standard review process applies. Yale set the communicator down. She stood up. She walked to the window of her office, which faced east across the Varath capital city, low buildings in pale stone, wide canals full of slow, dark water, the twin moons just beginning to show above the horizon. It was a beautiful city. She had spent 11 years here. She had learned its transit system, its dining customs, its seasonal light patterns. She had made, if not friends, then colleagues and careful acquaintances among the council staff. She looked at it now and thought, in 4 to 8 months, this city will be in the path of something that deleted 14 stars and left no record of the civilizations it consumed. And the council that runs this city just declined, for the 3rd time, to look at the evidence. She turned back to her desk. "Oliver," she said, "get me a public session, not emergency, standard open floor. I want speaking time within the next 12 hours. "I can get you 40 minutes at the afternoon session tomorrow," Oliver said. "Book it," Yale sat down again, "and get me a connection to Director Whitfield at Earth Command, Priority Channel." The connection opened in under a minute. Director Nora Whitfield appeared on screen, a compact, precise woman in her late 50s who had spent 30 years in Earth's space program and had the particular stillness of someone who had handled many crises and had developed a deep personal relationship with calm. "You've seen Sierra's data," Nora said. It was not a question. "Yes, talk to me about the fleet." 200 vessels are already positioned at the inner marker. Another 160 are en route. The construction armada is 4 weeks behind them. Nora paused. "Yale, we are moving everything we have." "I know," Yale said. "I need you to know that the council is still not coming, not officially, not in time." "We assumed that from the start," Nora said. "The plan doesn't require the council." "It requires time," Yale said. "We know, that's what the fleet is for." Nora's expression stayed steady. "Sierra's data on the consumption pattern is exactly what our theoretical team needed. They've been modeling for 6 weeks with incomplete information. Now they have the full picture. They say the sequential pattern is confirmed. It does not adapt. It does not alter course. It follows the path of highest stellar mass density and it does not deviate." "Which means it can be redirected," Yale said. "Which means it can be redirected," Nora agreed. "Once, and only if the lure is large enough and the timing is exact." "And if it's not?" Nora was quiet for a moment. "Then we learned something very important about what cannot stop it, and we pass that information on to whatever comes after us." Yale absorbed that, and the canopy, the resonance disruptors. "In production, manufacturing is running 24 hours. We'll have sufficient units deployed in the expanse within 10 weeks, assuming we can get them there without being detected." Nora looked at her directly. "The question is whether we have 10 weeks. Sierra said 4 to 8 months. 4 to 8 months until it reaches the outer council systems. The expanse is closer. We need to engage it in the expanse, not in populated space." Nora checked something off-screen. "We have a window. It's not comfortable, but it exists." "Use it," Yale said. "Already using it," Nora said. "What do you need from the council end?" Yale thought for a moment. "I need them to stay out of the way. If they send ships into the expanse on a survey mission now, they'll disrupt the deployment timeline. I need the access zone kept clear." "Can you manage that?" "I can try," Yale said. "The session tomorrow, I'm going to show them what Sierra found, not to get their help, to make sure they don't panic in the wrong direction." "And if they panic in the wrong direction anyway?" Yale looked at the window. The twin moons were higher now, their light soft and silver on the canal water. "Then we work around them," she said. "We've been doing that for 11 years. We know how." She ended the call. She sat in the quiet of her office and pulled up the session notes for tomorrow's presentation. She had 40 minutes. She had 14 missing stars, debris from a civilization no one remembered, a sensor record of something that could not be classified, and a fleet of 600 Earth vessels currently moving into the darkest part of the galaxy to build a trap for something that had never in its existence been trapped. She began to write. At hour 2 of the afternoon session, when the chamber had worked through 3 routine agenda items and was beginning to settle into the comfortable rhythm of institutional process, Yale Doran walked back to the podium. She did not ease in this time either. She said, 2 days ago, the Adamant returned from a reconnaissance mission in the Keth Expanse. I am going to show you what it found. She activated the display. The chamber watched. She said nothing while they watched. She let the data speak, the missing stars, the debris field, the expansion field moving toward a vessel that had to jump clear in time. When it finished, she said, one crew member of the Adamant did not survive the mission. His name was Aldridge. He stayed at his post to ensure full transmission of data so that I could show it to you today. The chamber was silent in a different way than it had been silent the first time. The first time it had been the silence of polite dismissal. This was the silence of people who had just seen something they could not argue with. Counselor Vrethsa did not speak for a long time. Then from the upper tier there was movement. Not laughter this time. The Thuvari representative, a species that had been council members for 800 years and had said almost nothing in Yale's entire tenure, stood up and spoke in their own language. The translation came through in a flat, even voice. The Thuvari recognized these patterns. Our historical archive contains a reference to something described in the same terms. Our archive was compiled 600 years ago from records that were already 2,000 years old. Those records were sealed at the request of 4 founding council members. We were not told why. We sealed them because we were asked to. We believed those members had good reasons. The Thuvari paused. We request that those records be unsealed immediately. Vrethsa said very quietly, granted. The chamber began to move. Not in the orderly way that council sessions moved, but in the rapid, overlapping way of people who had been sitting still and have suddenly realized that sitting still is no longer the appropriate response. Yale stood at the podium and let it happen. She watched counselors communicate urgently with their delegations. She watched 4 species pull their representatives into side-channel consultations. She watched Vrethsa read something on a private screen with the expression of someone who is reading something they had been hoping they would never have to read. Then from the side of the chamber, Counselor Dho moved forward. The Dho were the oldest species in the council. No one knew exactly how old. They did not discuss it. They were present in records that predated every other current member by thousands of years, and they had a reputation for speaking rarely and only when what they had to say could not be unsaid. Counselor Dho was small still, and had eyes that caught light in a way that suggested they had been collecting light for a very long time. Ambassador Doran, the Dho said. The voice through the translator was calm and careful. What is Earth proposing to do? The chamber went quiet again. Every representative listened. Yale looked at the Dho. She looked at the full chamber. She had been preparing for this question for 3 months. Earth is not proposing, she said. Earth is acting. The question is whether any of you are coming with us. A pause. Because the window to act in the expanse closes in weeks, the window to act in council space closes in months. After that, there is no more window. She looked around the chamber. We have a plan. It is not a certainty, but it is the only option we have found that has any chance of working, and it is based on data that this council should have gathered 30 years ago and chose not to. Her voice was level, not angry, not pleading, simply clear. Earth is going. We are going because we built this plan and we believe in it. We are also going because someone has to go first, and we have found that we are generally willing to be the ones who go first when no one else will. She stepped back from the podium. "The session is yours," she said to Vrethsa, "but I am leaving for Earth Command in 2 hours. If any delegation wishes to participate in the joint defense operation, Oliver Grant has the contact details. He will be at the side door until I depart." She walked off the floor. Behind her, the chamber erupted. She did not look back. Oliver was waiting by the door with his datapad and a fresh cup of tea, which she took and finally actually drank. "How many?" she said. "The DHO committed in the first 30 seconds after you walked off," Oliver said. "I have 2 others already." "That's enough," Yale said. "Let's go." The shuttle was ready. As she boarded, her communicator buzzed, a message from Nora Whitfield. It said, "Fleet is in position. Canopy deployment begins in 6 hours. We're ready when you get here." Yale typed back, "On my way." She buckled in. The shuttle lifted clear of Verath Prime and turned toward the dark. The Keth expanse was different when you came to it with intent. Sierra Cole felt it the moment the adamant crossed the boundary again. The same wrong silence, the same absence of background noise. But this time she did not feel like a visitor in an empty room. This time she was here with 600 ships at her back, and a plan that 18 Earth engineers had spent 6 weeks building out of physics, mathematics, and a very specific kind of stubbornness that Earth Command had always been quietly proud of. She stood at the forward console. The bridge crew moved around her with the quiet efficiency of people who had done their preparation and were now in the execution phase. No wasted motion. No unnecessary words. "Fleet status," she said. Navigator Grace Elford had a new station configuration, larger display, 3 additional sensor feeds running simultaneously. All 600 vessels confirmed in formation. Construction Armada is holding at the outer marker as ordered. Drive signatures suppressed across the fleet. We are as quiet as we can be. "Is it quiet enough?" Paul Decker said. "We're about to find out," Sierra said. The plan, which Earth Command called Operation Canopy, though Sierra's crew had privately taken to calling it the longest possible shot, had 3 phases. The first phase had already been in progress for 6 weeks, the deployment of the Resonance Disruptor network throughout the expanse. 12 automated construction drones had been planting the devices across a 3 billion kilometer grid, hiding them inside the debris fields and within the gravitational eddies left behind by the consumed stars. Each disruptor was the size of a small house and contained a power source that could sustain continuous output for 48 hours. They were connected in a network. They were designed to activate simultaneously. The second phase was the lure. The lure was the construction Armada's work, a spherical mass of compressed material, electromagnetically charged, threaded through with a gravity field generator, and calibrated to broadcast the exact gravitational and electromagnetic signature of a star with a mass 4 times that of Earth's sun. It did not look like a star. It did not shine. But to whatever sensors the absence used to identify its next target, it would read as the most attractive meal in the expanse. Sierra was going to drive it into position. And then, when the absence turned from its course toward the lure, and when enough of its leading field was within the Canopy network's coverage zone, Earth was going to trigger the disruptors and see what happened. The theoretical team's best estimate was a 40 to 60% chance of significant disruption. Significant meant structural damage to the field. Damage meant the consumption process would be interrupted. Interruption meant the absent zone's expansion would stop, at minimum temporarily, possibly permanently. Possibly, minimum, temporarily. Sierra had built her career on worse odds. "Lure is in position," Grace said. "Construction Armada has confirmed deployment and is pulling back to safe distance." "Good." Sierra looked at the long-range display. The absent zone was ahead of them, its edge visible on sensors as that particular clean boundary. Behind the boundary, nothing. In front of it, space and a 14-star-shaped absence, and whatever process was continuing to move through the darkness. Paul, Sierra said, "Where is it now?" Paul had the deep sensor array running on maximum passive sensitivity. He had not stopped working since they jumped back in. Cross-referencing the Adament's data from the first mission with the real-time readings, current position suggests it has consumed 2 additional stars since our last visit. It is moving along the predicted vector. He paused. And it is close. Commander, it is significantly closer to the inner expanse boundary than our models predicted. It's moving faster. Sierra felt the information land and made herself stay still. How much faster? Our window is shorter. If it maintains this rate, the 4 to 8 month estimate is wrong. It will reach the outer council systems in approximately 10 weeks. 10 weeks, not 4 months, 10 weeks. She turned to communications. Get me a channel to Ambassador Doran on the command vessel, now. Yale's voice came through in 7 seconds. She had been aboard the Earth Command cruiser Heritage since departing Verath Prime, coordinating with both Earth Command and the Council Remnant Forces, the DHO vessel and the 2 Allied ships that had joined them. It was not a large Allied force. It was enough. "I'm here," Yale said. "The timeline has moved," Sierra said. 10 weeks total. The canopy needs to trigger before it reaches the boundary. A brief silence. Then, how much time do we have to work with? If we trigger the canopy at the right position, maybe 3 weeks. Sierra looked at Paul. Paul nodded. The lure needs to draw it into the center of the grid. At its current speed, that alignment will occur in approximately 11 days. 11 days, Yale said. Yes. Then we use 11 days. Yale's voice was steady. It always was. What do you need from this end? Keep the Allied ships at the outer perimeter. I need this space clear. If the absence picks up multiple ships at different positions, it may not orient toward the lure. We need it focused. Understood. Done. Sierra closed the channel. She turned back to the display. 11 days. 11 days of flying in absolute silence, suppressing every drive signature and energy emission, maintaining the fiction that the expanse was empty except for a very attractive fake star sitting in the middle of the canopy grid. 11 days of waiting for something that had consumed stars, without pausing to do something it had never done before, change direction. We are now in silent running, Sierra said to the bridge. No active emissions, minimum internal power usage, all personal communicators on local only. We breathe quietly for 11 days and then we find out if this works. The bridge settled. The crew sat at their stations. Outside the windows, the expanse was dark and cold and still. On day 3, the first sign came. Paul called Sierra from her brief rest period in a voice that was perfectly controlled, and therefore told her immediately that it was important. She was on the bridge in 90 seconds. It's responding to the lure, Paul said. Very slightly, barely measurable, but it has shifted trajectory by a 0.3-degree arc in the direction of the lure's position. Sierra looked at the display. A 0.3-degree arc. On the scale of something that consumed stars, that was enormous. It noticed, Gray said softly. It noticed, Sierra agreed. Maintain position, do not change anything, let it come. On day 5, the arc became a clear bearing change. The absence was moving toward the lure, not rapidly, the way a tide moved, steady and large and indifferent but pointed now in the right direction. On day 7, Paul's monitoring showed 3 more stars consumed along the absence's previous path, now fallen behind it as it angled toward the center of the expanse. Each disappearance was a quiet disaster in its own right, stars that had burned for billions of years, gone in the time it took to take a breath. Sierra logged each one with a timestamp and nothing else. There was no adequate language for it. She recorded the facts and moved on, because moving on was the only option. On day 9, the leading edge of the absence's expansion field entered the outer grid of the canopy network. Sierra had not slept properly in 4 days. She was not the only one. Paul had been at his station for 18 hours straight and had only agreed to rest when Sierra pointed out that he would be making critical calculations at the most important moment and needed a functional brain to do it. Grace had developed the particular kind of watchfulness that comes from sustained high focus, still, quiet, seeing everything. Henry Caldwell had been in engineering since day one, running continuous diagnostics on the jump drive and the main systems, because Henry's personal philosophy was that the time to check your equipment was before you needed it, not during. He had sent up 3 written status reports, each one thorough and reassuring. Sierra appreciated him in the uncomplicated way that she appreciated anyone who simply did their job very well without needing to be told. Leading edge is in the outer grid, Paul said. Canopy network is reading all units active and connected, ready for trigger on your command. Not yet, Sierra said. We need the core of the field inside the central grid. If we trigger too early, we damage the edges and the core keeps moving. How long? Based on current advance rate, 18 hours. 18 hours. I want continuous position updates every 15 minutes, Sierra said. No exceptions. Anyone who is not at a critical station rest in rotation. Grace, you first. 2 hours, then trade with Decker. I'm fine, Grace said. I know you're fine, rest anyway. Grace went. Paul took over navigation monitoring alongside his sensors. The bridge quieted again. Sierra sat in the command seat and watched the display and thought about the first time she had stood on a beach as a child in North Wales and felt the tide coming in. The way the water moved with complete indifference to anything standing in its path. Not aggressively, not with any feeling at all, simply moving because that is what it did. She had stepped back from the water then because she was 7 years old, and she had learned that when something much larger than you moves toward you, stepping back is the intelligent choice. She was not stepping back now. At hour 14, the core of the absence's expansion field entered the central canopy grid. At hour 16, its leading edge had advanced far enough that the geometric center of the expansion was precisely aligned with the geometric center of the network. Paul's voice, Commander, we have optimal grid coverage. Sierra stood. She did not need to, she was already standing. All crew confirm harnesses, she said. This may produce a significant shockwave. I want everyone secured. Confirmations came from every station, from engineering, from the small crew quarters. Sierra looked at the display. The absence was there, visible on sensors as that impossible clean edge, the boundary of nothing, moving steadily toward them and toward the lure, and toward the center of the web they had been building for 6 weeks. Paul, she said, on my mark, trigger the full canopy network, simultaneous activation across all units. Ready, Paul said. Mark. Paul's hand moved. The expanse lit up. Not with visible light. The disruptors did not produce light. They produced a resonance field, a structured pattern of gravitational and electromagnetic pulses designed specifically to interfere with the frequencies that the theoretical team had identified in the absence's consumption wave. On the sensor display, the canopy grid appeared as a bloom of signal, hundreds of points of light representing hundreds of devices, all firing at once. The expansion field of the absence hit the resonance grid and fractured. It did not stop. It did not disappear, but it fractured, which was a word Sierra had learned from the theoretical team and which she now understood viscerally as she watched it happen. The clean boundary of the absence, that knife-edge line between something and nothing, became ragged. It broke into sections. Some sections continued forward. Some sections stopped. Some sections moved backward. On the passive sensors, something happened that had never appeared in any Earth reading before, a signal. Brief, sharp, intense. Not communication, not intelligence. More like the sound a structure made when a load it had never been designed to handle was applied to it. The field is destabilizing, Paul said, and his voice was steady but his eyes were very wide. Core coherence is dropping. The consumption process it's interrupting. The rate of advance has fallen to 0 in the central sector. The outer sectors, Sira said, still advancing, but slower, and the sections are no longer connected to each other. It's not one unified field anymore, it's fragments. Fragments that can still consume stars, Sira said. Yes, but fragments that are not coordinating, if the theoretical team is right. Without coherent field coordination, each fragment will eventually stall and collapse. They can't sustain the process without the unified structure. How long? Unknown. Best estimate is weeks to months for natural field collapse. But the core, the central mass, is significantly damaged. It is not advancing. It has not advanced in the last 4 minutes. 4 minutes, the silence held. Then, from deep in the sensors, from whatever remained of the core of the absence at the center of the canopy grid, something shifted. The fragments that had been moving independently began to contract, not toward council space, inward, back toward the dark, back toward the Keth expanse, toward whatever lay at the bottom of all that impossible nothing. The absence was retreating. It was not a dramatic retreat. It was not a rout. It moved the way it always moved, without hurry, without feeling like a tide going out. But it was going out. The boundary of the absent zone was moving backward. Sira Cole stood at the command console of the S-Adamant and watched the thing that had consumed stars without noticing them pull back from the edge of the space where people lived. She did not cheer. None of the crew cheered. The bridge was very quiet for a long time. Then Henry's voice came up from engineering. "Commander, just wanted to confirm from the drive room. Jump drive is at full charge and all systems are nominal." A pause. "We're good down here." It was not what he was actually saying. What he was actually saying was, "We did it. We're still here. We're good." Sira put her hand on the edge of the console. "S-Adamant," she said, "day 214. The canopy operation has produced confirmed fragmentation of the target expansion field. Field advance has halted. Partial retreat is underway. Full structural collapse of the target is not confirmed. This is not a final resolution." She paused. "But we made it stop. Log entry ends." She looked at Paul. Paul looked back at her. He looked like he had not slept in 4 days, which was accurate, and like he might need to sit down very soon, which was also probably accurate. "Get me a channel to Ambassador Doran," Sira said. The channel opened. "It worked," Sira said. "Partially. The field is fractured. The core is retreating. The fragments are unstable and the theoretical team needs to model their collapse timeline, but the advance has stopped." On the other end, Yale Doran was quiet for a moment. "You made it bleed," Yale said. "Yes," Sira said, "I think we did." 1 year later. Yale Doran walked back into the grand convocation hall on Vareth Prime, and the chamber was different. Not physically. The hall was the same enormous space, the same tiered rings, the same pale stone and filtered light. But the species who occupied those rings had changed. Some were absent, some were new, and the ones who remained were sitting differently. There was no comfortable settling into institutional routine. There was no quiet amusement at the small human at the podium. There was attention. The specific, focused attention of people who had looked at something true and terrible, and had decided afterward that looking away was no longer something they were willing to do. Yale stood at the podium and waited for the hall to settle. The DHO were seated in the front row, which was not their usual position. Counselor DHO had moved there 3 months after the canopy operation, quietly, without explanation, and had been there for every session since. Yale had never asked why. She thought she understood. Counselor Vrethsa was also present. There had been a vote of accountability within the Varath governance structure 6 months ago, following the unsealing of the historical archive records. Vrethsa had survived the vote narrowly, and had since been visibly and consistently present at every council session, every committee hearing, every closed-door briefing. Yale took it as an apology expressed in the only language bureaucracies actually spoke: attendance. 3 new species had applied for council membership. All 3 had cited, in their formal applications, the events of the past year as the reason they wished to be part of this conversation. Yale thought that was the most hopeful thing she had seen in 11 years on Verath Prime. She began to speak. The absence, as we have taken to calling it, is currently located at the estimated center of the Keth expanse. Earth's monitoring network, which is operational and will remain so permanently, shows no advance activity in the past 60 days. The fragmented field sections produced by the canopy operation have been collapsing at a rate consistent with our theoretical models. 8 of the 14 major fragments have fully dissipated. The remaining 6 are expected to dissipate within the next 3 to 5 months. She paused. The core has not dissipated. It has not advanced. It is doing something that our instruments cannot fully characterize, but the theoretical team's working description is reconstitution. It is repairing itself. She looked around the chamber. This is not a surprise. We did not expect permanent destruction. We disrupted its process and forced it to withdraw. Based on the rate of reconstitution our instruments can measure, the core will be capable of resuming activity in an estimated 40 to 200 years. The chamber was very quiet. 40 years, said one of the new applicant species observers, in a translated voice that carried the particular tone of someone who has just heard a number and is not sure if they heard correctly. 40 is the lower estimate, Yale said. 200 is the upper. The uncertainty reflects the limits of what our instruments can resolve at that range. We are improving those instruments. Earth is currently designing and funding a permanent monitoring installation at the edge of the expanse. Construction begins in 8 months. She looked at the chamber. I want to talk about the stars that are gone. The hall settled further if that was possible. The stars that are gone was not a phrase that had a political solution. It was simply a fact. 14 stars consumed before Earth's canopy network had been in place, before anyone had known what the absence was or that it could be interfered with. 14 stellar systems, their planets, whatever they had carried, simply gone, not destroyed in an explosion that left debris and light. Erased. Present one day, absent the next, no trace remaining. We cannot bring them back, Yale said. I am not going to suggest that we can or imply that any amount of future preparation changes what has already been lost. It is lost. The 14 stars are gone. The civilization whose debris we found in the expanse, the people who built those structures, they are gone in a way that is older and deeper than anything we have language for. Their name is not recorded anywhere. Their history is not in any archive. She paused. It is in ours now, she said. Earth has named the debris field the Aldrich Field after a crew member of the S. Adamant who gave his life to transmit the data that confirmed the absence was real. We cannot give the builders of those structures their name back, but we can remember that they existed. We can make sure that the record says, there were people here. They built something extraordinary. They were taken before anyone came to help, and we are sorry. The chamber was still. I am also going to talk about the archive, Yale said. There was a subtle shift in the room, not quite discomfort, something more honest than discomfort, recognition. The unsealed records confirm what the Thuvari representative began to outline at our last emergency session. The absence has been encountered before. 4 times in recorded history, across records spanning the last 4,000 years, different species encountered either the absence itself or clear evidence of its activity. In each case, the records were sealed, in 3 of those cases at the request of founding or senior council members. The stated reasoning, where reasoning was given at all, was stability. The concern that widespread knowledge of the absence would cause panic, destabilize member species, and potentially fracture the council. She let that sit for a moment. Those decisions were made by individuals who believed they were protecting people. I am not standing here to condemn them. I am standing here to note the consequence. 4 encounters over 4,000 years and no accumulated knowledge. No database. No defensive preparation. Each encounter started from nothing, and in the earliest 3 cases, the affected civilizations did not survive. In the 4th, the absence retreated on its own for reasons unknown, and the council interpreted that as resolution. She looked at Vrethsa. Earth's warning was the 5th encounter. It was treated as the previous 4 had been treated, as something manageable through established channels, something to be logged and reviewed and addressed in due time. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. It was not the fault of any individual in this chamber that the archive was sealed. It is the responsibility of every individual in this chamber that it never happens again. She reached under the podium and brought out a physical document, printed on earth paper, bound with a simple cover, old-fashioned in a way that was deliberate. The Adamant Accord, she said. Earth's proposal for a permanent, treaty-bound, joint early warning and defensive coordination network, with a mandatory unsealed archive of all contact events past and future, and a standing response protocol that does not require a full council vote to activate. She said it on the podium. The Accord designates Earth as the primary coordination hub, not because Earth is the strongest or oldest or most capable member of this council, but because, as I said 1 year ago in this chamber, we appear to be generally willing to be the ones who go first when no one else will. She looked up. We did not do this alone. Commander Sierra Cole and the crew of the S. Adamant went into the expanse when the council said it was empty. Engineer Henry Caldwell kept 600 ships running in silent conditions for 11 days. Navigator Grace Elford plotted a course through a region of space that wasn't supposed to have anything in it, and found 14 things worth coming home to warn you about. Lieutenant Paul Decker stayed at his post until every byte of critical data was transmitted and then reached his harness in the final seconds. She paused, and Specialist Aldridge stayed 3 seconds longer and did not. The chamber held that. The DHO stayed when others left, Yale continued. 2 species sent ships and crew when it would have been far easier to follow the others toward the core. Director Nora Whitfield at Earth Command built the Canopy network in 6 weeks from a theoretical model that had never been tested. Every person who built a disruptor unit, every engineer who worked on the lure, every pilot who held formation for 11 days in silence, all of them made this work. She straightened. But I want to be direct with you about something. Earth did not do this because we are brave. Earth did not do this because we are more capable than other species, or stronger, or because we have some particular destiny. Earth did this because 11 years ago we walked into this chamber for the first time, and we noticed very quickly that the Council's way of handling uncomfortable information was to file it and wait. And we decided, quietly and without making a declaration of it, that we were not going to do that. She looked around the room one more time. We are young. We have been members of this council for 11 years, which is nothing by any measure this chamber uses, but we are paying attention. We have always been paying attention, and we intend to keep doing so. She slid the accord forward on the podium. The Adamant Accord is open for signature. Earth has already signed. The DHO have signed. I hope before this session ends that many more of you will. She stepped back. This time she did not leave. She stood to the side of the podium and watched as Counselor DHO rose first and crossed the floor, took the document, and signed it without speaking. Then the Thuvari representative. Then, after a pause, a delegate from one of the new applicant species who had not yet officially joined the council, but had been observing from the gallery, a small, quiet being whose species had encountered a fragment of the absence 300 years ago, and had spent 3 centuries wondering what it had been. They signed with an instrument from their own world. Counselor Vrethsa was the 8th to sign. The document made its way around the chamber. Yale watched. She did not count the signatures out loud. She did not mark each one as a victory. She simply watched, and for the first time in a long time, she stood still and let the moment be what it was. Oliver Grant appeared at her elbow with a cup of tea, which she took, and as she had been doing lately, actually drank while it was still warm. "How many?" she said. 26 so far," Oliver said. "More coming." Yale looked at the stars through the chamber's high windows. Vareth Prime's twin moons were not visible from this angle at this hour. But the stars were, the real ones, the ones that were still there, the ones that the absence had not reached. Some of them had planets. Some of those planets had people. Some of those people did not know, and might not know for generations, how close the stars above them had come to going dark. She was all right with that. Her job was not to frighten people. Her job was to make sure the darkness did not come. And somewhere out in the Keth expanse, in the deepest part of the nothing that should have been empty, the absence was healing. Slowly, quietly, with the patience of something that had existed long before any of them and fully expected to exist long after. It would come back. She knew that. The theoretical team knew that. Everyone in this chamber who had read the accord and understood it knew that. Earth would be ready. Not alone this time. Not ignored. Not filing a report and waiting for a review that would never come, but with 26 signed documents and a monitoring network already under construction and a fleet that had proven once that interference was possible. They would spend the next 40 to 200 years improving that interference, building better tools, training the people who would use them, keeping the archive open, watching. Always watching. Yale Doran finished her tea. She looked at the stars. She thought about Sierra Cole, who was currently 3 months into a new deep range survey mission. This one officially sanctioned, with council support, with a science team 3 times the size of the Adamant's original crew. She thought about Paul Decker, who had published his sensor analysis of the canopy operation, and received a response from a Varath astrophysicist suggesting a theoretical model that might extend the effective range of the disruptors by 40%. She thought about Henry Caldwell, who had declined a promotion to a desk position at Earth Command and was currently in engineering on the Adamant, which was exactly where he wanted to be. She thought about Aldridge. She thought about the people who had built those structures in the expanse, the great curved pieces of engineered material, cold and dark and enormous, drifting through the dark for longer than humanity had been anything more than a thought in the process of evolution. She thought about whatever they had tried. She thought about the fact that they had tried. She hoped wherever they were, they knew that someone had come after, that someone had stood in the place where they had been and had looked at what happened to them and had said, "No, we are not going to let this continue." She hoped they knew. The session continued. More signatures, more discussion. The hard work of building something that would last, not just a treaty, but a culture, a habit, a shared reflex toward looking at the uncomfortable thing directly and dealing with it. It was slow work. It was the kind of work that did not have a single dramatic moment, just one careful step after another, each one building on the last. Earth was good at that kind of work. Yale stood by the chamber wall and watched it happen and thought, the stars are still there. For now, and because of what this chamber is building today, for a while longer. That was enough. That was everything.